looking at the Israelites going from Egypt, from the desert as they were wandering to the promised land. You know, we know that those of us that are well aware with our Bibles, they wandered for 40 plus years, and Moses has now died. Joshua has been appointed leader, and they're going over into the land. And we saw in our second lesson, when we looked at Rahab, how she had said that the people's hearts were melting, and she knew exactly what was coming. And you know, she said, "Make a covenant." And we saw last week how there was a miracle in crossing the Jordan. That even though the Jordan was at flood season during that time, they were, soon as the 12, a representative from each tribe stepped into the water, stepped into the flowing water, it stopped, just like the Red Sea. So you had a special thing for that. This lesson, I will tell you, if you, I hope you've been able to read through Joshua. This lesson, excuse me, it's important, but I will tell you so. I think it seems, if you just casually read it, it seems out of place. But sometimes, before you go to step 2, you have to make sure you have step 1. And I heard something that the legendary football coach for the Green Bay Packers, Vince Lombardi, when he would start off practice sessions, beginning of the football term, he would bring out a football and he would say, "Gentlemen, this is a football." And it's like, they've been playing football for years. Why would you say that? Because it's like, this is the basics. John Wooden, the coach of UCLA, would teach his players how to tie their shoelaces. That was the first thing they learned before dribbling, before passing. He taught them how to tie their shoelaces. Thank you, love. Why? Because during the course of the game, if your shoelace came undone and you tripped over your shoelace, it could cost the game if it was close. Because why? Because you didn't get the basics down. And sometimes when we look at this lesson, when we look at life, and I'll make an application even before we start, I will tell you, many people want the blessings of God. They start claiming blessings and favor and all that other stuff. But they haven't been obedient to step 1. And if you're not obedient into step 1, you know, it's almost like you want another job, but you can't get on time to the one that you got. You can't work at the one that you have, right? You always been called in about having to fix something. It's like, wait a minute. You know, God says in one parable, it said, "You've been faithful over a few things. I'll make you ruler over many." A lot of folks want to be ruler over many without being faithful over the few. And when we get to Joshua chapter 5, notice what it says. Look at chapter 5, verse 1. We all there? Look what it says. It says, "So it was, when all the kings of the Amorites who were on the west side of the Jordan, and all the kings of the Canaanites who were by the sea, heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of the Jordan from before the children of Israel until we had crossed over, that their hearts melted, and there was no spirit in them any longer because of the children of Israel." Think of that, right? You got the Amorites on the west side, Canaanites up at the sea, right? You think, right? Come on, you cross Jordan, right? You got blessings and miracles coming, right? So what you think's supposed to happen? Somebody gonna come at you, all right? What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Come on, what you gonna do, Brother Arthur? It's still a little way. So, but you know, you're looking at it, and it's like, if somebody getting ready to attack you, right? Don't you like, okay, well, let's go get them. You coming, right? But notice what it says at the end of verse 1. All those folks who were by the sea heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of the Jordan before the children of Israel until we had crossed over. What happened to their hearts? It melted. And there was what? Come on. When's the best time to defeat somebody? When they're discouraged, right? When they just like, oh, forget it. And you saw what's coming. Hold your finger there in chapter 5. Look back at chapter 2. Because we'll read it. I refer to it, but let's read it. Look what Rahab said when she was talking to the spies. Joshua 2 verse 10 says, "For we have heard how the Lord dried up the waters of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who are on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things," what does Rahab say? "Our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and on the earth beneath." God's doing all this, right? So you would think in your mind, okay, good. Your heart's melted. You discouraged. We jumping out to attack. And notice, go back to Joshua 5. Notice verse 2. Look what it says in verse 2. "At that time, the Lord said to Joshua, make flint knives for yourselves and circumcise the sons of Israel again the second time." So Joshua made flint knives for himself and circumcised the sons of Israel at the hill of the foreskins. And this is the reason why Joshua circumcised them. All the people who had come out from Egypt were males. All the men of war had died in the wilderness on their way after they had come out of Egypt. For all the people who came out had been circumcised, but all the people born in the wilderness on the way as they came out of Egypt had not been circumcised. For the children of Israel walked 40 years in the wilderness till all the people who were men of war who came out of Egypt were consumed because they did not obey the voice of the Lord, to whom the Lord swore that he would not show them the land which the Lord had sworn to their fathers that he would give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. Then Joshua circumcised their sons with whom he had raised up in their place, and they were uncircumcised because they had not been circumcised on the way. So it was when they had finished circumcising all the people that they stayed in their places in the camp till they were healed. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "This day I have rolled away the reproach from Egypt from you." Therefore the name of the place is called Gilgal to this day. Look what's going on, right? Instead of going into battle, see, put your battle strategy in place, get your army, go get them. God says no. You know, sometimes if you don't get the small details, you know, anybody do math problems, you know, those higher math, algebra 2, trig, you know, sometimes? Yeah, I know I'm not one of them, but yeah, thank you, a few of you out there, right? I realized something when I took the class, and I got a thank you, Jesus C. But I knew if you messed up at the beginning, if you didn't get those basics of the a squared plus b, you know, because then when you start doing x minus y and parentheses and all that, and you're lost. I'm lost. But once you get that, sometimes you have to catch those little things. Even in talking about marriage in Song of Solomon, several times there's a verse in Song of Solomon. It says, "Catch the little foxes that spoil them out." You got to get the little stuff, because you know it's almost, I've said before, like pulling weeds. You can pull a weed when it's small and it will come up, but if you wait to where it gets, you know, this way, you'll remember it's got as much root underneath. And when Joshua said, look at verse 2. "At that time, the Lord said to Joshua, make flint knives for yourselves and circumcise the sons of Israel again the second time. So Joshua made flint knives for himself and circumcised the sons of Israel at the heel of the foreskin. Circumcision was a sign of the covenant with Abraham, right? And Israel was supposed to do it. And Exodus 12 gives the requirements for eating the Passover that first time. And one of the things that, you know what, I have taught Exodus, I've looked at, read it and all, but it was like, no, before you do the Passover, make sure everybody's circumcised. And that's what it says, circumcise the sons of Israel the second time. Because the first time was when Abraham did it. He said, everybody gonna get it all at once, because you had never done it. You were done. And when you look at it, look at verse 4. He gives the reasons. He said, and this is the reason. You know, sometimes I wish God would say that more often. Not have to figure it out. And this is the reason why Joshua circumcised them. He said, all the people who came out of Egypt, who were males, all the men of war, had died in the wilderness on the way after they had come out of Egypt. For all the people who came out had been circumcised, but all the people born in the wilderness on the way as they came out of Egypt had not been circumcised. So you got a whole group of folks, right? You got a whole group of folks. The older folks had died, right? How come they didn't circumcise them? They weren't obedient. You know, come on. You circumcised the baby on the 8th day, right? In Philippians 3, when Paul talks about his pedigree, he talks about, I circumcised on the 8th day. That was the day you did it, right? And even though they were moving, it's not like they could not do it. Why what? Why would they be obedient? Because I think they were just disobedient. You know, sometimes when I've looked at the children of Israel, it's like, you know what? I'm not going to do it. Because we're going to see something else they didn't do. And hold your finger there in Joshua 5. Look to Genesis 17. Let me kind of expand on this point for a minute. Genesis 17. When you get there, say amen. Look at verse 10. Notice what God says to Abraham. He said in verse 10, he says, this is what? My covenant. What's a covenant? Agreement, right? A binding agreement, a contract. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you, right? So you don't get a pass just because Abraham's off the scene. He says there, every male child among you shall be circumcised. And verse 11 says, and you shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and that shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised. Every male child in your generation who is born in your house or bought with money from any foreigner who is not your descendant, he who is born in your house, he who was bought with your money, must be what? Circumcised, and my covenant shall be in your flesh as an everlasting covenant. Do you think it's clear? It's very clear, right? It's clear. It's clear. But notice what it said. And verse 14, and the uncircumcised male child who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be what? Cut off from his people. He has what? First step, right? You didn't do it. What did you do? You broke the covenant, right? Any ambiguity there? None. None. So you have Israel have a covenant you haven't kept, right? Well, but see, boy, hold it. Lord told them. They didn't do it. Now, side issue. A lot of times, ready? I think we have valid issues. We have valid reasons, we think, for saying, I'm not going to do it. Right? We think it's a valid reason. What does God say? I don't care. You know? Because if nothing else, we see in this passage, after they get circumcised, we're going to see it a little later, God let them rest and the people didn't attack. So it's not like, you know, you're scared. Sometimes you just say, I'm not going to do it. But look on the outline. Look on the outline. On letter D, on that one, it says an act of faith. Ready? What's the significance of it? We know circumcision is putting off of the flesh. It's a sign of the covenant. And it's something, ready, that shows that I can be obedient to God when he asks me to. And see, the only problem is, you know, when you 8 days old, the baby's memory ain't all that good. Right? Oh, but when you grown, just the thought of it, you know, some of us men will tell you, oh, no, not that. And we read there in Genesis 17, as God told Abraham, you're supposed to do it on the 8th day, ready? Which means it wasn't the child's responsibility. It was a parent's responsibility. You have to take care of your children to do it. And the thing is that, I mean, not to be off color, but every time a man would touch his penis, he would be reminded he was in covenant. And he'd have to do it several times a day. You were in covenant. You were in covenant, right? And I will tell you though, but circumcision in Scripture, what one author noted, he says it was a powerful act of consecration to God. In it, an Israelite says, I'm not like other nations. I listen to God and do what he says do. It was stepping out in faithful obedience and identifying yourself as one of the Lord's people. It was renouncing the flesh and the world. It was dying to self and living to God. Come on. And the hardest thing, sometimes, ready, is to say yes to God. Because sometimes we want to say, yes, God, I know, but. Turn over in your Bible to the book of Romans. Romans chapter 4. See, sometimes, like I said, it's the little stuff. This is basic training. Romans 4, if you're there, say amen. Look at verse 9. Paul writes, does this blessedness then come upon the circumcised only, or upon the uncircumcised also? For we say that faith was accounted to Abraham for righteousness. How then was it accounted? While he was circumcised or uncircumcised? Not while circumcised, but while what? Uncircumcised. God came to him before the covenant, right? Before it happened. God came to him in Genesis 12. He said again in Genesis 15. It wasn't until Genesis 18 that he said to circumcise. And notice in verse 11, and it says, and he received the sign of circumcision, a seal of righteousness of the faith which he had while still uncircumcised, that he might be the father of those who believe, though they are uncircumcised, that righteousness may be what? Imputed to them. And the father of circumcision to those who are not only are of the circumcision, but who also walk in the steps of faith, which our father Abraham had while still uncircumcised. In other words, ready? He had to do it. Even though God says, listen, we're still in relationship. Look at Colossians chapter 2. Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians 2. You there? Look at verse 11. Notice what Paul says there to the church of Colossae. It says, in him you were also circumcised with the circumcision made how? Without hands. In other words, no earthly person did it. By putting off the body of sins of the flesh by the circumcision of Christ. Right? You got rid of it. Look, turn over to Deuteronomy. Let's go back to the Old Testament. Deuteronomy chapter 10. This second law, this reiteration of the law that Moses gives a second time before they're about to go into the new land. Deuteronomy 10, if you're there, say amen. Notice what Moses says there. He says 10 verse 16. Deuteronomy 10:16. He says, therefore, circumcise what? The foreskin of your heart. Because see, there's some of you women, I know you talk about it, it's like, guess what? That does not apply to me. But guess what? Oh, yeah, it does. No, you may not have a physical one, but ready? Moses said, circumcise that foreskin of your heart. In other words, ready? Be obedient to God. You got to cut away your flesh. Because, come on, what will your flesh say? Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't be obedient to God. Yeah, it's going to hurt. Don't do it. Turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 30. Just in case they didn't get it the first time. No, Deuteronomy 30, look at verse 6. What does Moses say there? He says, and the Lord your God will what? Circumcise what? Your heart and the heart of your descendants. To do what? To love the Lord your God how? All your heart and with all your soul, that you may see. He said, listen, it was just, what was the significance? It just wasn't cutting that foreskin. Because then only half the folks would do that. But it was really like, ready? I want you to get your heart straight to follow me. Because apparently for the last 40 years, you have ignored me. You know, and sometimes we think about how long-suffering and merciful God is. Because if 40 years I get this, I'm going to tell you, I may not be too happy with you. But God said, no, I want you to do it. Go back to Joshua chapter 5. Because in verse 7, it says, then Joshua circumcised their sons whom he had raised up in their place, for they were uncircumcised because they had not been circumcised on the way. So it was when they had finished circumcising all the people that they stayed in their places in the camp until what? See, I will tell you something. Ready? Obeying God can leave you vulnerable. It can leave you vulnerable. Because I will tell you, sometimes as a church, ready? As a church, we love people. We reach out to people. And I can tell you right now, folks will take advantage of your goodness. It will leave you vulnerable. They will come in, tell you a hard luck story, and you'll try to help them. And folks, you'll find out later sometime, I got scammed. It leaves you vulnerable because you have to be trusted. You have to be loving. You have to be caring. I mean, we've got to be discerning, but all of that goes in. And notice on verse 9, it says, and the Lord said to Joshua, this day I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you. Therefore, the name of the place is called Gilgal. It's like, ready? God said, Joshua, y'all ain't under condemnation anymore. So sit here until you get healed. Because we won't turn to it, but in Genesis 34, there's an incident with Jacob's son Simeon and Levi. When I think it's Shechem and Hamor had raped Dinah, their sister. And, Jacob's sons was just as hot-headed as Jacob. And Simeon and Levi said, okay, we're going to do it. The men apparently liked Dinah. And so they said, well, you know what? If you want to be with us, the sign of the covenant is circumcision. So, we'll let our daughter, our sister marry you. But they said, not just, Shechem's family, but everybody got to be circumcised. He was the king. And so it's like, okay, we do it. And Genesis 34 says, while they was in pain trying to recover, Simeon and Levi came and killed everybody. Oh, yeah. It's like, oh, right? Come on. Now, this would have been the perfect time for Jericho to attack. But ready? God in his providence said, no, I'm going to give you time to heal. And when they got to the point, notice though, they healed. Look at verse 10. See, now they messed up again. It says, now the children of Israel camped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at twilight on the plains of Jericho. And they ate the produce of the land on the day after the Passover, unleavened bread and parched grain on the very same day. Then the manna ceased on the day after they had eaten the produce of the land, and the children of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate the food of the land of Canaan that year. Now think about it, right? We didn't read it, but we alluded to it. In Exodus 12, circumcision was necessary to keep the Passover that first time, right? And somehow I miss details, right? Israel has the Passover. Ready? They go into Canaan, which is just a couple of days' journey, right? Getting ready to go toward Canaan, getting ready to go into the land, right? And what do? They decide they're going to send spies, right? Spied out the land, and the spies came back with what Scripture calls an evil report, right? And God says, all right, fine. Y'all spent 40 days in the wilderness. I'm going to give you 1 day for every year. Numbers 13, I believe it is, said. So they had 1 day for every year of wandering. In that whole 40 years, how many Passovers should they have kept? 40. How many did they keep? Right? It says it's supposed to be a memorial. Take that back. It's not none, it was one. Turn to Numbers chapter 9. Because that first year, Numbers chapter 9. You there? Look at verse 1. It says, now the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the first month of the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt, saying, let the children of Israel keep the Passover at its appointed time. On the 14th day of the month at twilight you shall keep it in its appointed time. According to all the rites and ceremonies you shall keep it. So Moses told the children of Israel that they should keep the Passover. And they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at twilight in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all that the Lord had commanded Moses, so the children of Israel did. So they kept it that first year out, right? But what about after that? Nothing. Nothing, right? They were wandering. Nothing. They were going. You know that, excuse me, it's the 14th day of Nisan. It's time to keep the Passover. What'd they do? Nothing. But then, go back to Joshua 5. Go back to Joshua 5. And it takes obedience and it takes faith. You have to sometimes say, okay, I will obey God and leave the consequences to him. But see, here comes the other area of faith. Now you think about all this time. What's going on? Think of these past 40 years. Ready? Exodus 15. They get water when it was bitter. Now you think about it. Sometimes we like to think it was just a few folks. No, it was. Scholars believe it could have been upwards of 2 million coming. I mean, it wasn't no small group. right? So you think about it. How much water does it take? You got to get fresh water, not just water, fresh water, right? You got to feed them people, right? So what happened? God got water out of a rock, made bitter water sweet in one instance in Exodus 15. Children of Israel complained, oh, Moses, you left us to die here in the wilderness. Weren't there enough graves that you sent us to die? Oh, and so God sent manna, right? What was manna? Manna was like a cake, a sweet cake, right? Came every morning with the dew. And what was Israel supposed to do? Collect enough how? For one day, right? And the first time the manna came, we read in Numbers, I believe, first time the manna come, I'm sorry, if you like me, I'm going to tell you the truth. If you look at my pantry, yes, I am a hoarder. I am a hoarder, and I will admit it. I got better in my old age, but I don't like the other day. Yesterday, I needed something. I was cooking something. Didn't have it. And it's like, y'all go to the store. I can't cook. Right? So, children of Israel that first day, they got manna. They stuffed it away in their tent. They did all that other stuff. Only problem was, what happened if you left it after a day? It bred worms, and it stunk until the Sabbath day. So they got 2 days worth, right? Come on. Look at what's going on. They got, look at verse 10. They kept the Passover, and verse 11 said, look at this life in the new land. And they ate of the produce of the land on the day after the Passover, unleavened bread and parched grain on the very same day. So ready, they're going through. Now they've already seen, two of them, Joshua and Caleb, saw, it was more than that, because those under 20 died. So you had a whole group. You knew what the land was like. Apparently it was producing a whole lot of stuff, right? You come and get it on the day after you keep the Passover. You go into the land, you get all that good stuff. Then what happens? Look, verse 12. Then what? Manna ceased. What do you think they're thinking? What happened? I guarantee they went out that next day because they had always had manna. Right? Come on. There's a whole group of them from 40 years and younger, had not known anything, ready, but a great miracle every morning. They ready? And what happened? Look on the outline. Because the miracle ceased. And what is a miracle? Notice I have three definitions there. The first one, it says a surprising and welcome event that is not explicable by natural or scientific laws and is therefore considered to be the work of a divine agency. Right? Miracles are, you can't explain it. It's surprising. It's just, Now, was Israel surprised about the manna? At first, right? At first, woo! What happened after year 25? Yeah. You don't think about it. They took it for granted. It was routine. Look at the second one. A highly improbable or extraordinary event, development or accomplishment that brings very welcome consequences. Right? Now, this was welcome because they wouldn't go eat. Because even when they got tired of the manna, they complained, say, can't we have some meat with the manna? You want a good manna burger? So God sent quail. Right? I will tell you something. Ready? The manna was spectacular. You get out in the morning and you touch the dew and it's a cake. That's spectacular, right? What was the quail? It was supernatural because it enough flew in every day. But that was it. It was just quail. Yeah. See, but look at what happened. What one commentator says this about this section. It says, when the people were able to provide for themselves from the rich produce of Canaan, God stopped the manna. He didn't want them to get lazy, but to enter into a new partnership of trust with him. You had to trust God to bring the manna every day, but you also had to trust him to provide you through other means. God always provides, but he is perfectly free to change the source of his provision from time to time. We need to trust in him, not in his manner of provision, or we stumble when that changes. And that's it. You right? If you come out and you say, "Oh, God's gonna send manna, so I'm not gonna worry about it," and that next morning you have no manna. Oh Lord, why'd you leave me? I can't believe it. See, miracles, ready, are the exception and not the rule. Too many folks keep living for a miracle and forget the exception. You know, sometimes if God has to stop the sun, he will do it to get his purpose and plan done. Ready? But how often did he stop the sun? One time. Right? But how often does he give you strength to fight the battle? See, sometimes we cannot depend on the spectacular to get us through. Oh God, I'm believing you for a miracle right now. And God may say, guess what? You ain't gonna get one. But you still gonna have, some folks, oh, I need a miracle in my finances. How many jobs have you applied for? Come on. Are you prepared when you walk in? I remember years ago, I haven't had to interview people for a job in quite some time now, thankfully. But I remember one time interviewing this one kid. He came in and it's like, okay, you're not going to get the job. You're not going to get the job. And I'm going to tell you why you're not going to get the job. And I had to say, ready? Look at you. For rule 1, don't bring your friend to the interview to sit outside the door. Come on. And folks, come on. They start asking God for something, and God said, listen, ready? I want you to go back to the basics. Right? You believe, oh, God, pay my rent. 2 Thessalonians 3 says, if a man don't work, he's not supposed to eat. It's basic, right? And see, sometimes, go back to Joshua 5. See, in verse 12, it says, then the manna ceased on the day after they ate the produce of the land. And the children of Israel no longer had manna, but what? They ate of the food of the land of Canaan. Ready? They had to trust God, all 2 million plus of them, if it was that many still, that God, you were still going to supply. You were still going to supply every day. It was going to be enough that we would eat. And when you get through, see, now that you think they're about ready to go in, and now even God gives this third kind of whoop. Hold up. Look at Joshua 5. Look at verse 13. It says, and it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, a man stood opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, are you for us or for our adversaries? So he said, no, but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshiped. And he said to him, what does my Lord say to his servant? Then the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, take your sandals off your foot, for the place you are stand is holy. And Joshua did so. I think, what are you thinking if you coming by, you walk it up just like, okay, God, whoo, I'm ready. And you come and see somebody with a sword up. What you thinking? What's going on? You go run. See, I ain't happy. A little scared. Look at verse 13. Look at the end of verse 13. Look at the question Joshua asked. He says, are you what? For us, or are you on our side or their side? Right? Doesn't that on the surface, doesn't that seem like a great question? You know what? That's a bad question. Because the answer was, verse 14, the answer was what? No. Are you for us? No. Are you for our adversaries? No. Whose side are you on? And the man said no. Right? See, what was Joshua's question? What was really the basis behind his question? Are you going to be with me? Or are you going to be against me? Right? Who's going to be with it? Come on. Are we there or not? And sometimes, ready? I've heard a whole lot of folks say, well, God is on our side. Somehow, we get to think, if we got, it's almost like, in a sports, picking teams. If I remember as a kid, when I was in elementary and junior high school, and we had to pick teams and play, right? I still remember, especially in elementary school, I said this before, that there was two girls, when you're a boy, you don't want the girls on your team, at least back in the 70s, because the girls couldn't play. However, at my school, there was two girls, I still remember, Adrian Jackson and Cheryl Campbell. Still remember. And they had brothers. And apparently and when I remember Adrian, we would play baseball, and Adrian would take the bat and she would get it and tap it and roll it this way and say, oh. And so when we had to pick, right, the smart person, who's the first one picked was Adrian. Who was the second one picked? Cheryl. See, and I didn't like to, because, the teacher was sometimes, she would let all the kids be team captain. I did not like when certain people were team captain, because if the first pick was not the best player, but their best friend. And if the other kid knew how to pick, he got Adrian and Cheryl. And we lost, right? And this is Joshua's thing. It's like, do we get Adrian and Cheryl or the other side? And it was neither. Because what was God saying? Ready? It was not time for Joshua to say, okay, hey, who he got that I can size up with? See, we get in trouble when we try to marshal the best forces to follow us, instead of saying, because look what it says in verse 14. And he said, no, but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have come now. And what did Joshua do? He fell on his face to the earth and worshiped and said, what does my Lord say to his servant? That is the proper response. Not, are you going to be on our side? The proper response is, ready? Okay, God, I'm on your side. Tell me what I need to do. He bowed down and he worshiped. See, we'll need to make sure as saints of God, ready, that we are on the Lord's side and not trying to get God on our side. Too many times, you know what? We come up with a program, we come up with a plan, and we say, okay, God, bless my plan. And God said, that is a dumb plan. Because it's not my plan. Because we're going to see next week when we get to Jericho, when you talk about military strategy for destroying a city, I'm sorry, marching around 7 times is not the strategy. You know, and Joshua, look at verse 15, because he's going to do something here. Then the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, do what? Take your sandals off your foot. For the place where you stand is what? It's holy. See, I think Joshua was seeing what we call a Christophany. And that's an appearance of Christ before he's born in Bethlehem. It's a Christophany. And you see it a couple of times. You see it we want in Genesis 32, when Jacob wrestles with that angel. And you know, Jacob wrestles all night long, and somehow even in the midst of that, the angel changes his name from Jacob to Israel, meaning one who supplants, or one who wrestles with God. You see it in Numbers, the scriptures there on the outline. You see it in Numbers 22 when Balaam is you know, Balaam's the prophet, and he was like, okay, Balak's gonna give me $5 to curse Israel, and God said, no, don't go. And he said, okay, he said he's gonna give me 10. And you know, Balaam got to the point, finally he was going on his donkey, and the donkey, you know, stopped, went on the side, and God finally had the donkey to talk and said, well, I've been a good donkey, why you hit me like that? And when God opened Balaam's eyes, he saw the angel of the Lord with that sword drawn. It's like, Balaam, you took another step. That donkey was saving your life. That was an angel of the Lord. In Judges 6, when the angel, it says the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon. We see it in some respects in Daniel 3, when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were in the fiery furnace. It said there was a fourth man, and Nebuchadnezzar, a heathen, said God sent his angel. It believe that's a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ. Doesn't happen often, right? And you got there, and Joshua, just like Moses, because turn to Exodus 4. Exodus 3. Exodus 3. See, when Moses, are you there? Look at verse 3. Exodus 3, starting there. It says, then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. So when he saw that, he turned aside to look. God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. Then he said, do not draw near this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is what? Holy ground. See, God told Joshua the same thing. He said, get up here. Take your shoes off. And you know, sometimes sometimes we try to make such mystical stuff out of it, but really it's like, ready? I don't want anything between me and God with that holy place. The sandals are, it's the sign of submission. You see sometimes it's like it's obedience. It's you see in the book of Ruth, when Boaz, you know, was about to marry Ruth, and he said, well, there's someone else closer, and that person had to go to the elders at the city gate and take off his shoe, and they spit at it, the whole thing. But you come in when Joshua took off. Go back to Joshua 5. The commander there said to Joshua, take off your sandal off, for the place you stand is holy. Joshua, I'm getting ready to lead you into something marvelous. And make sure when you meet with me, there's nothing separate. And sometimes as believers, we have to make sure that there's nothing between us. Like a shoe, like a sin, like a foreskin. There's nothing there that God said, this is part of getting past basic training. God doesn't want anything between us and him. Nothing. See, the minute we start letting something in there, right, he doesn't have contact with us. Before Bible study, put a new battery in here. And reading, we put a battery, and it's an amazing thing. Battery has a positive side and a negative side. Battery works, but if I had flipped it and put the positive with the negative and the negative with even though the battery was operational, it was charged, right? The microphone here is working. It goes in that people viewing online, if you're watching or see it, if it had just been flipped, if there was something between making that charge, it wouldn't work. And that's what God is calling us in this lesson. It's like, before you get ready to have great victories, but if there is something between me and you, if there's a foreskin that you holding on to, a Passover you not keeping, a shoe, whatever that shoe represents, that's in there, that's God said, I can't have contact with you that I want with you because there's something in between, right? We need to take it off. Amen? I'm going to stop there. Any questions? Mm-hmm. You'll eat the stuff, but you realize though how God, it says earlier, they had the plan that he had told them, I believe in chapter 3, that they were supposed to start. They were starting on the east and going to the Mediterranean. That you had to move, and that's what we're going to. Matter of fact, there's one interlude on the lesson, but the next 3 weeks is going to talk about moving. How important it is to go from. You can't stay where you were, because it would have been sure tempting for Israel to stay in Jericho. But you can't do that. Amen? Amen. Let's receive our offering for this evening. And as we do, thank you, Brother John. Are there any prayer requests, praise reports? Your tenant? Amen. Yes, Sister Chantal. Amen. Any other? A couple of things. I got an update from Pastor Harper on Brother Sheldon. He's moved to a convalescent center. So he's mending. He had to have another surgery, but he's mending. So we thank God for that. Uh, and also let's remember to keep Brother McGowan in our prayers during this time. As well as I should have, I made a call to a friend. I told you 2 weeks ago, good librarian friend passed away. I talked to her husband today, and just pray for him. He, as they say, the grief process. I talked after my wife left. I was getting stuff trying to leave, and I said, let me call, because they were back in Louisiana. He's back in Louisiana, and I said, let me call, just quickly. And the quick call turned into a 35, 40-minute call. I was rushing out the house but you know what? You know, thank God for his grace and for his comfort. He's able to just say,